page count is totally manipulable, but audiobook length is not really so much.
Is that it manipulable?
Could be a word, or I could have just made that up. Who's to say?
Not me. I'm not to say. Hello, everybody. I'm Cody Troyer.
And I'm Brent Gaisford.
And we are the Hugonauts.
This episode, we are talking about Neuromancer by William Gibson, the cyberpunk, the OG of cyberpunk. It is published in 1984, 271 pages, 10 and a half hours on audiobook. Nice and tight, nice and great. Excited about this.
Yes, and next episode we will be talking about A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, which should be fun, right in time for Christmas, just in the Christmas spirit.
This episode is sponsored by Mythos, Origin of the Gods by A.A. It's a high-stakes sci-fi book with a cosmic twist.
The story takes you to the planet Mythos, where destiny, betrayal, and a brewing criminal underworld collide. A billion-year peace has been shattered by the death of a powerful mother god, leaving her 5 sons to grapple with their mysterious origins, hidden forces, and the fractured utopia they once called home.
Mythos, The Origin of the Gods, is available wherever you get ebooks or audiobooks, and the Amazon link is in the episode notes.
All right, Brent, let's talk about Neuromancer. I'm going to start the summary this time with one of the best first sentences in any novel that launched 1,000 ships in the cyberpunk genre. The sky above Sheba City was the color of a television, tuned to a dead channel. Now, what happens sweet in the rest of the novel?
All right, so Neuromancer follows Case, a former cowboy / hacker who used jacked in through the Matrix to steal data and other valuable things from corporations. But he did something stupid. He tried to steal from one of his former employers, and they poisoned him. They damaged his central nervous system, and he can no longer access the Matrix. So he's washed up in Sheba City, this gritty criminal underworld of Tokyo, where he's doing odd jobs, dealing drugs, addicted to drugs, and sort of on the way out here. But then he gets found by Molly and Armitage, this femme fatale and this powerful guy who say they have a job for him and they can fix him. And Case gets picked up into this insane scheme to do a run, the Starlight Run, which we'll tell you more about, but that's the setup.
Yes, that is Neuromancer. And as usual, we're going to talk about the pre-spoiler stuff, like why you should read this book.
Yeah, and then we'll very clearly tell you, okay, we're about to do post-spoilers. We'll tell you what happens at the end of the book. If you want to stop there, you can, but you're safe until then.
Yeah, okay. I gave Neuromancer 4.5 out of 5. As you know, I do halves because I'm indecisive. And I found this novel fantastic. I've read it a few times, and the most recent reread was just as fun as the others. It's just fun. It's propulsive. You see why the genre came out of this and why people want to go back to the well. And he just was so prescient with so many things. It just still works today, 40 years later.
Yeah, it's totally nuts that this book was published 40 years ago. Yeah, the 40-year anniversary actually must have happened sometime this year, because 1984. But, okay, I'm going to give it a 4. I loved the beginning and the vibe and the mood, the grittiness, the mix of like techno grittiness, underbelly of society, criminal. Like, it's an incredible vibe. I did not like the end quite as much. I didn't feel like the ending was totally stuck. But I love the vibe, and I'm so happy it got created because it created all of cyberpunk and sci-fi as we know it today. But yeah, the first, 10-ish chapters of this book are like perfect. The perfect book. It's insane.
I might disagree with you, but we'll have to find out later in the episode. I don't disagree that the beginning rocks. However, let's just get into it. His writing, cyberpunk, the genre, the plot, and the fun propulsiveness of the beginning. Where would you like to start? You tell me.
Let's talk about the technology. It's so freaking cool and amazing that it's all still feels so real. So, first of all, he coined the term the Matrix, later made famous by The Matrix.
The Matrix. You all know what that means pretty much. So
Yep. But
cyberspace.
yeah, this representation of cyberspace as a visual medium that you can like interact with visually is a really, really, really interesting idea. He's got you can upload knowledge into your brain with like a chip, which you call Microsoft's, which I think is really this one's a little funny because like Microsoft, the company, is actually like 10, 15 years older than this book. So I think probably William Gibson just like hadn't heard about it. But
I also think that that's like, it just sounds like what it is. So I don't know if he knows about the company, but like also it just works for what he does. They're tiny things that are software for your brain. So
for sure. I mean, that's why Microsoft is called that sense. Too. Yeah. It is a good name. I don't disagree. But yeah, it was so awesome. And again, in The Matrix, where they're like, he's like, oh, I know Kung Fu. Like, anyway, you can do that in Neuromancer.
We've got arcologies, an early representation of an arcology, which is, a building that is a self-sustaining system. People live in there, they work in there. Their water gets recycled and feeds the plants that oxygenate the building and feed the carp that the people eat. It's the idea of a self-sustaining building. That's in Count Zero, but I'll count it. There's this severance.
The second book in the Sprawl trilogy.
Sorry, yeah, second book in the Sprawl trilogy. There's the severance procedure, kind of, with Molly's sex work history.
A neural cutout. So so your mind goes blank, and basically like a program runs your body, and they use this for sex workers
or someone else, which they also use, like you can rent out your body to someone else to use virtually.
Yep. Yeah, you can feel what someone else is feeling in their real body. Like you can virtually connect to their nerve endings, basically.
Right. So these are some ideas. Some of these, I guess, are ideas of not scientific, but we've seen in other science fiction. This one's very much just true to the world. No cash. Cash is like only for the underworld, and all the bills are like really used up and almost faded. And I was like, that's pretty prescient for 1984. He also, I think, represents a pretty good understanding of AI. He seems to have, there's the AI is consciousness central to the plot, but also the regular AIs in the world are more like, I think, large language models are and other current AI, where they're not conscious and smart. They just like do tasks. So I thought he kind of nailed that. The funniest one, which he spends most of the foreword to the book is great. It's written by Gibson, or is it the afterword that's by Gibson?
No, the foreword's by Gibson. He wrote it in 2004 for the 20th anniversary.
Yeah. And so he spends a lot of it bemoaning how an important sequence in the book relies on synchronized ringing of payphones that are on the street. And he's like, how did I not think about cell phones? And I'm like, maybe you can forgive yourself for that, Mr.
Yeah, it
Gibson.
totally like payphones fit with like the gritty vibe, though. Like they're perfect.
And I think that's exactly why like humanity and mistakes injected into art make it better. Is details like that. Like it puts it in its own sphere, in its own time, in a way, because it gets some stuff wrong. So you can read it and be like, oh, this is a feel and a vibe, and you got all this stuff right, but it's also imperfect in pleasant ways that make it more distinct.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, it's funny that he's a guy who thinks about the future a lot, so I guess he's kicking himself. But yeah, on reading the book, like I never would have been like, oh, he didn't see cell phones coming. Like Gibson, that Trump.
Shame
like,
on you, buddy.
Yeah, it didn't make a difference at all. Yeah.
I also the thing that shocks me the most about the whole thing is, all of this said, he wrote the damn thing on a typewriter. How did he think of all of this stuff? How did he think of all this stuff when he wasn't even using a computer? Like, it's not even like part of his workflow, and he's still thinking of all this computing technology and
I mean, there weren't a lot of personal computers at that time, but yeah. Anyway, no, I totally agree. Like, yeah, 84
it's insane.
early. Yes.
When it's not part of your everyday life to think of all this stuff and be right about it. But it also begs the question, I think Neuromancer, among others, but a lot of cyberpunk novels in particular were kind of the chicken and the egg scenario. Is it like super prescient, or were a bunch of programmers reading Gibson and Snow Crash and others at that time when computers were growing, and their impressions from this made them make computers like this?
What I would say about that is actually we don't actually really have a lot of computers like this, but these are still the ideas that we think are interesting with computers. I think he was just like hugely influential in future art and also real technological thinking about what's possible. But we're chasing a lot of things, that we still haven't created.
Visualization of certain things, like the idea of the Matrix, the Tronscape, or you've seen it in Snow Crash too, of like the cyberspace grid with the buildings instead of just a bunch of code. We're still enamored with that as a society, and so creators create around it.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's talk about the vibe. I think Gibson is a fabulous writer, and I feel like I pinpointed one thing about why it works so well is because he attends objects when he's describing a scene instead of people and their characteristics and the physical space. He's listing a bunch of basically kitsch that is in every place they go. It's like what crappy stuff do people value that they hang up to decorate their space with? He attends those details really well, and that's what gives you that kind of like neon cyberpunk feel.
I think my favorite scene that captures this is when they go to visit the Finn for the first time, who's like a fence / data broker / maybe his importance is just he has a room where you're not getting listened to. But anyway,
and like a pawnbroker too.
Yeah, but he's describing like all these piles of old technology, but the way he describes them is like they're organic matter that's like decomposing, and it's like, oh yeah, that's what this book feels like. Is like it's high technology, but somehow also like decomposed and falling apart. Also with a tinge of cigarette smoke, like. He actually, as I'm thinking about this, like he kind of reminds me of Murakami, where it's like everyone's like very cool and like skinny and like hot and like angsty and smoking a lot of cigarettes. And like in Murakami, it's just like they're in coffee shops, and in Gibson, they're in techno dystopia, but like same vibe.
Yes, they're all cool, and they're all cool even if they're gross. Like the Finn, who's like got yellowed teeth and like thinning long hair, and like he lives in his lair, and you can tell he smells bad and smells like cigarettes. But he's still kind of cool because he knows so much, and he like he knows all the people and the secrets and he can tell you
apocryphal stories about like jade heads and like crazy Japanese assassins. And it's like, whoa, this guy's cool. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. He knows his stuff. He's underground. He's cool. Yeah. It's all very like, there is an underground. It's dirty. It's grimy, but we only know the cool people who are in it because they can't follow the rules and they're too good anyways.
Yeah. Speaking of, I mean, should we talk about Molly, the coolest of the cool?
Yeah. Molly is the coolest of the cool. I'd love to talk about Molly and just the characters in general. I think Gibson's character writing, we may disagree, but go ahead on Molly. Sorry.
I mean, I love Molly. Okay. So Molly's a razor girl. So first off, nailed it. She's Wolverine, but with 5 coming out of her fingertips. She can like send out crazy razor blades whenever she wants to. I don't actually know that she uses them for anything in the book, but they're sweet. And she's got a flechette pistol she always has. And she has like mirrored glasses, like sewn to her face, so you can't see her eyes. She's got like a heads up display, basically.
You never see her eyes, which is what, can you get cooler than never seeing your eyes? There's no, I mean, biologically, primary.
Yeah, her sunglasses can't even eyes. Come off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Those are on there, baby.
Yeah, and she's super hot, obviously, and inexplicably sleeps with our main character as soon as they meet for extremely unclear reasons. Right.
That part, yeah, sure. It's like, okay. I mean, I guess it fits in the story. It's just like, you know, and she's, what I like about Molly is she has the power the whole time.
Oh yeah,
She's the one who's dangerous, more dangerous than anybody we ever run into, and like is just doing what she wants.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a great character. So here's what I'll say about the characters, though. I think she's a great character in that she's awesome. I don't feel like she's a great character in that, like, what does Molly care about, or why is Molly doing what she's doing? Or let me just go ahead and say that about anyone in the book. Like, why is anyone doing anything? I don't know, but they're all very cool. And so maybe that's okay.
I feel like it's all, I'm not sure I agree, because I feel like in the world that Gibson's created, they don't really need motivation other than their basic motivations. Case likes the feeling of operating in the Matrix because he's good at it, and it's like the feeling of flying to him, basically, which to me is like, in a story that's an action driven plot machine with a lot of cool ideas, works as a motivation. I mean, I don't know if I could fly, maybe that's all I'd care about. And Molly's clearly got a messed up past, and she wants to feel powerful and have more resources to be her own person, which I thought, works for me. A lot of other characters, the Finn is just obsessed with hoarding stuff and finding secrets, whatever. I think they're basic motivations, but they match the character of the plot. And so it didn't bother me. And I actually thought they were good characters because they're all pretty memorable. I remember the names. I remember each one. I remember the role they play. I love the Rasta guys on the ship.
Malcolm.
Malcolm.
Wait, I didn't nail that accent at all. But anyway, I'll work on it for later in the. I'm gonna get to.
Just what? Ditch it.
No, come on.
You don't need it.
There's hold on. How did they? So there's one part actually in the book. So as is tradition, I read this one, and Cody listened to the audiobook. And there's one part in the book where I don't know if you're gonna remember this. There's one part where it's very clear that he says like Malcolm with like a Jamaican accent, and then somebody else is like, oh, Malcolm, and they like spell it differently. Did the author like lean into their Jamaican accent when they were being Rasta guys?
I mean, yeah, there's definitely an accent. So yeah. That was a funny moment. I also love, I think Gibson, of course, the prescient guy he is, nailed music, which, as you know, is a nitpick of mine in many books. I love the Zion dub they listen to. You just hear this, like, you can feel the ship they're on. It's full of weed smoke and just like pounding, pulsing, bassy reggae music. And it just fits the character of Cyberpunk so well, or I guess it defined it. But you can feel a lot of this book. Like you said, you can smell it, you can hear it, it's tactile. And so that's why I like Gibson's writing so much. The music was a great part of it.
I totally agree. I loved the dub. We should just clarify. So at one point they go up in space and they go to this place called Zion, which is all the stuff we've been talking about. It's a space station full of Rasta. It's a Rastafarian space station.
Right. And they're their own nation, basically. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And they're good guys, obviously.
Yes, obviously. And then, the bad guy, the villains are interesting too. It's a classic trope, but like
there's almost like
rich people who want to live forever, but also there aren't really any villains. It's an interesting world, and it feels very realistic in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and we get into space. I mean, we didn't even talk about space and our technology stuff, but we get up into space. True. There's very cool space stations. And
all the wealthy people live up there, just being immortal and like gene cloning. I feel like that's another thing that I love when authors lean into in science fiction, is that there's a lot of like body modification. He also does this, Gibson does in his novel Peripheral, tons of body modification that's really interesting and novel. And I think that's an interesting idea about the future, because that is what humans will do first and like gravitate toward first. It's like the technologies that change the way we look and make us look better and younger and all that stuff is like what we'll pay the most money for, and hence what will get like created first, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Anything else, Prees?
I don't think so. I think we've hit the highlights. Yeah, I think it's time for it.
Okay. Well, let's do some recommended books first.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you kick it off?
I will start with Altered Carbon by Richard K. Morgan. Just like Silo with Hugh Howey, this is another first novel that just skyrocketed Morgan to fame when he sold the rights to Netflix. Good for him. And it is a novel about skins, as they're called, where a world in which people are stored on discs, essentially like your brain, your personality, and then you can go into other people's bodies who've been outfitted, or synthetic bodies, etc. And it's a detective noir cyberpunk novel in a human hegemony solar system, larger space area. Very cool, interesting, fun novel.
For sure.
What do you got?
I'm going to go with the cyberpunk progeny of Neuromancer, Snow Crash, which we both deeply love. Neil Stephenson's like breakout novel. We have a great episode about Snow Crash if you want to check that out. But yeah, just incredibly fun cyberpunk, and it's funny. It's a cyberpunk novel, but it's also satire. But also has a bunch of interesting ideas. There's a lot happening with Snow Crash, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a perfect book in our opinion. And finally, something easy, Count Zero, the rest of the Sprawl trilogy. Book 2 after Neuromancer, Count Zero, I think is the best of the trilogy, personally. And then Mona Lisa Overdrive, the third one. They're all fantastic. They're a little bit like different stories happening in the same world, but there's some character crossovers, particularly in Mona Lisa Overdrive. Yeah, everyone has a different opinion on which is their favorite. So you'll have to let us know which one was your favorite.
You know, hearing you describe that, I've actually never read Count Zero. I'm realizing I've only read Neuromancer and Mona Lisa Overdrive, so I got to read that one. Interesting.
Huh. I wonder how you... I guess you don't really need to have Count Zero. There's some characters from it in Mona Lisa Overdrive, but...
I was confused in Mona Lisa Overdrive. This might be why.
There you go. That makes total sense. All right, should we spoil up this pup?
For sure. So yeah, if you do not want to hear any spoilers for the end of Neuromancer, turn aside now. Otherwise, in 3, 2, 1, here we go. Here's what happens. So Case and Molly and Armitage, the guy who's running the show, they put the rest of their pieces together, and it turns out what they are doing is trying to hack into / also simultaneously break into Straylight, which is a section of this orbital space station owned by the Tessier
Ashpool.
Tessier Ashpool, there you go.
Yes.
The Tessier Ashpool conglomerate / family / like literally the founders are still alive because they cryo sleep and just never die and then clone themselves. And they have a couple of AIs that they've created, but have like really strict controls on their growth. And there's actually like a transnational organization, kind of like Interpol, called Turing, that like will kill you if you try to free an AI and let it grow. And it turns out they, in fact, have been hired by one of those two AIs to free it and let it grow. And so they have to break into and hack into Straylight to free Wintermute, the AI that's hired them. And they do, I guess. Yeah.
They do, and they find the Tessier Ashpools, and they kill one of them.
They kill Ashpool,
yeah,
of the original couple, and it turns out he killed Tessier. Ashpool, I guess, is the bad guy. We find out sort of after he's already dead. It's like, oh, he was actually the bad one, and Molly kind of just shot him because he was being crazy.
Right. Yeah. And there's also like a bunch of fun scenes along the way. I feel like what Gibson does really well is like make moments that feel cinematic. And so you're moving from thing to thing and they're all different, you know, like when they're on Earth near the beginning, you know, they're going to the fancy hotels and they're doing like Case's first punch into the Matrix in his deck, and then they're breaking into a corporate building, and then they have the scenes of going to the streets of Turkey to find the Finn and get his
Riviera, the
Riviera. Sorry, yes, Riviera. He's an illusionist.
Yeah, that's a good name for him.
Yeah, he makes like holograms, but he can put them in your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's another great character. Is very cool. Maybe,
he's the bad guy. Yeah.
But just because he's kind of a drug addict who's out to serve himself.
Well, and he's an asshole and tortures people and is trying to kill them.
Oh, right. Okay, I forgot about that. I guess, okay, so now that I'm like describing it more, I think we could get to the bottom of the character thing, like why it works in here. They're closer to superheroes than they are to literary characters, aren't they? They're like, here's their thing, and here's their one motivation, but it's basic enough to go through all this exciting stuff and for you to remember who they are.
That's totally right.
It works in that way.
Yeah, that's totally right. And actually the second half of the book feels like a superhero movie too, where it's just like nonstop action and like you barely have enough context for what's going on because it's just like craziness is happening constantly. Which I think I don't like superhero movies very much because I'm a old curmudgeon, as you all know. You won't be surprised to hear that. So maybe that's why I didn't like the ending as much. But you're totally right. That is what it feels like. It's like there's action on every page, but the only way to make that work is like you can't have any context. There can't be any pieces on the table. And so in some ways it's like, oh, here's a crazy thing I just told you about, and now we're doing it. Anyway, yeah.
Right. But I think why he succeeds at that is because he's a fantastic show don't tell author. So he's giving you the world and enough of the characters and the mystery, the info, all on the way, so that you're into more than just what's on the page and what the action is. You want to see the results and figure out the mysteries and understand the technology and like who's behind all this. Wintermute, the AI, and then at the end he escapes. We should talk about Neuromancer. So I read this book like, I don't know, 15 years ago.
And when I got like to the end of this book, I was like, oh, I forgot that Neuromancer was the name of the other AI. So Wintermute is the AI that we are familiar with the whole book. He realizes pretty early that Wintermute is behind this mission that he's gotten them all involved in. And, but we know there's two AIs that Tessier Ashpool has. And at the very end, you find out the other one calls itself Neuromancer, and is sort of like the emotional AI, and Wintermute is the rational AI.
Neuromancer,
and they
like
get to child. And then they like get to unite into one rational emotional being is kind of like the climax. That's what they free them to do.
Right. And then they end up like communicating with an AI that's apparently in like Alpha Centauri. That's kind of
that was a wild throwaway.
I liked it.
Just like it was like two sentences. He's like, oh yeah, I met another one. And like, oh really? Where? He's like, oh, it was encoded in signals we picked up in the 70s. Yeah, there's an AI in Alpha Centauri. She's like, oh, okay.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. I thought his denouement was great too. The denouement Neuromancer, because it's short and sweet and adds
falling action for non-Frenchies.
Oh, sorry. Denouement's what it's called.
You're an English major.
It's short, but it adds the info you want. Case. And I like this switching of the heteronormative gender roles. Case gets left by Molly.
Oh, that's right. She gives him a Dear John. She's just like, yo, I'm over it. Peace. I'm out.
Yeah, they like hang out kind of together for a couple months, and then she just leaves him a note in the hotel, and she's like, I'm gone. And Case is like, yeah, that makes sense. And he kind of doesn't really know what to do next. He's like, I guess I'll do my cyber cowboy thing. I'm going to go back to the old bar from the beginning, and the guy doesn't even remember me. Dang. And Molly's like off doing her cool stuff. The last line of the entire novel I also loved, is Case looking at the skyline in Sheba City, and it's just, he never saw Molly again. And that closes down, like that's just kind of hardcore and fun. Like it's a really like a big ending line. It does, I think, maybe put him in a jam for Mona Lisa Overdrive, but those of you who've read that can decide for us, or let us know what you think. But I loved that. I loved the ending. I liked it all the way through. You said you didn't like.
I loved the beginning. I loved the beginning, like desperately. The middle and the end, not as much. I just felt like I wanted there to be like a point or a takeaway to like the action and like what we're learning. It was like there's so much action and excitement and stuff, but it was like it just felt like it was. It felt like a Marvel movie. It wasn't like there was like a big. It didn't feel like I was like. I mean, listeners to the show won't be shocked to hear like I really like philosophical sci-fi. Like I wanted there to be like a big idea that we were supposed to like find or learn about through the action. It kind of didn't feel like that happened.
Now my counterpoint to that would be, I think that first of all, I think there's tons of crazy philosophical and technological ideas along the way that are interesting to go into in their own time. And as he just kind of lets it wash over you and doesn't overly explain it, there's plenty of room for thinking and it does sink in. I also would like to argue that perhaps that is because we're so familiar with AI consciousness as a science fiction concept now. And so it's not as novel to us to have like, oh, there are this AI is two parts of a real person who merge into one thing, and then they're all over the world inside of the Matrix that the humans use to run their world. This AI is a being inside of everything. It's too powerful, and it's communicating with alien AIs and all this stuff. And when you have a ton of other stories that have done that and perhaps even built on it, done it better, asked more of the philosophical questions, that kind of stuff, it's not as you don't get as enamored with it as you might have in 1984. So I don't know if that's, I mean, which is to say, that could still be disappointing. But
yeah, I also think he just like, he doesn't expand on anything in a way that like can be a strength. I mean, it's a very short book given it's an incredibly dense, the idea density is like off the charts.
It's the perfect, I'm just going to go on the record here and say that 10 hours on audiobook, because I have no gauge for actual page count, but 10 hours on audiobook is how long a novel is supposed to be. I actually think
audiobook is the best measure of book length because you can't get word count. Word count is like really it, but you can't get that.
True.
And page count is totally manipulable, but audiobook length is not really so much. I'm with you. I think audiobook length is great. Anyway.
Is that it manipulable?
Could be a word, or I could have just made that up. Who's to say?
Not me. I'm not to say. But what do you think of my hot take there?
Okay, so I first read this book, like as I said, like 15 years ago when I was like much less familiar with sci-fi and was way less steeped in these ideas. Granted, I'd already seen The Matrix, but I still kind of felt that way. And actually, I liked the book less then because I was really confused because he explains everything so little. I think this is kind of like an expert sci-fi book. Like you actually need to know a lot of concepts because he'll just drop something and give you like 2 sentences vaguely sort of describing it, but mostly assuming you already know what it is. And this time reading it, I was like, oh yeah, I do know what that is. Okay, that's cool. But the first time I was just like, what is going on? I don't know.
That may be maybe a youth thing too. Because I think he does a pretty good job of maybe you just appreciate it more because I think it's still enjoyable without that stuff. It's easy to just be like, oh, that's like cool stuff and go buy it because there's so much action and whatever that's happening that's on the side of it. But it is more fun to like be able to think about all these things he's bringing to the table, which I do think I agree requires a little more of an experienced sci-fi reader. I'll also reiterate my hot take question was actually regarding the length of the perfect book. 10 hours.
I would want to look at some book lengths, but like in general, I think I agree with you. That's about right. Like I would say like 9 to 12, maybe. Like if I see a book between 9 and 12, even up to 14, I can be like, okay, over 14 is where I start to be like, ooh, did you try to edit it at all or what?
Yeah, I mean, maybe not in fantasy. They definitely
They don't try to
have
edit it.
more leash. I don't know what goes on there, but clearly they're great
This
books
is
that
why
are much
also
longer.
For those in the audience who we periodically, one of our most common questions we get asked is like, why haven't you covered a Peter F. Hamilton book yet? This is why. This is why they're so long.
And yet I've read 6 of them, and as I'll say, if you read some of them, go ahead.
You buy your Audible audiobooks. I get mine from Libby, and so I only have 3 weeks, and his books are like 36 hours long. And so I'm always
that
like,
makes sense.
Every time Pandora's Star comes up to the top of my queue, which is very frequently, like my hold comes up on Pandora's Star, and I'm like, am I going to be able to read these 36 hours in the next 21 days? The answer is always no.
Am I skiing the next 20 days or driving and only driving? Yeah. Okay. Well, I see what you mean. I also think, in general, my point was, obviously it's silly about the length of a book, but also just less so about like what I like in a book length for reading myself, but more so in a like, should an author be able to get a point across and make a riveting story that feels like a journey within that amount of time? I think yes.
I think yes too. I mean, I think there's some great, really long books.
Oh, totally. Of course.
But yeah, generally I agree with you. I'm a huge proponent of the Oscar Wilde quote. He famously like told someone at the end of a letter, he's like, "Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. I wrote such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one." And I think that's like spot on and right. Like if you can always get your ideas down. Like it's so smart and right. Anyway,
yeah. I think any art form is about, people don't think of it this way, but any art form is like sculpting. Like it's more about the subtraction than it is about the addition of mass. That's what makes good art. IMO. Speaking of, we'll have to talk about A Picture of Dorian Gray at some point, which I thought was Portrait of Dorian Gray, which is some sort of Mandela effect, but
it's The Picture of Dorian Gray?
Yeah, The Picture of Dorian Gray.
I thought it was a portrait too.
Well, anyways, though, next time we will be talking about
A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess.
Yep, another classic. And we hope you join us for that.
We will see you then. Keep reading, everybody.
All right, later, man.